This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Wharfe, who is currently Director of Procurement and Commercial Operations at TfL. Jonathan's career spans over 20 plus years of procurement experience at C-suite director level in FTSE PLCs such as Vodafone, PwC, Royal Mail and Accenture. Jonathan has a proven track record of successfully going into complex, disenfranchised, failing procurement functions and building more of a community of engaged people and bring real insight into an organisation. Jonathan also has an MBA, educated at Oxford Saïd Business School and Cranfield University. Let's get on with today's show. So Jono, firstly, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks a lot, Martin. Good to see you.
Yeah, and you. We're working out it's been over 10 years since we first met each other, so
time
it
does fly, doesn't it?
Yeah. I wanted to pick up firstly, I know one of the things that you're really passionate about is people. And in the intro I made with you, we talked around sort of the community and giving sort of a feel of that wherever you've worked. So I guess my first question is, how have you been able to build a community of engaged people where you've worked in your career to date?
That's a great question. I think I've seen a lot of organisations where people coming in and they have structures and they have policies and procedures. But one of the things I think they miss is they don't listen. So one of the first things I do is I go and listen. I listen to the people that have been there before, listen to the teams that have been there before, listen to the business, listen to the suppliers, because people generally know what's going wrong and they know what needs to be done and they know what, and not all organisations are the same, not all suppliers are the same. It sounds obvious, but how often do people try and apply the standard models, the standard approach, and before listening? And I think listening for me as a leader is the first step to building trust.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody that is very open about trust. Is something that I know I have to earn. And you earn that by listening to people and acting on their challenges, but also communicating very clearly what you believe needs to be done and working with them. Again, people talk about empowerment. It's a word that's used a lot. But what that needs as a leader is to actually delegate and trust people. And that's scary. And actually, people will never quite do things the way you really want them to do, because you have to do it yourself in order to do that. But every time they deliver and they succeed or they fail and you work with them together to get better, you're building trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of thing that I work on. And the other piece is culture. Again, a lot of people talk about culture, but how do you build culture? And to me, it's not something that you can force. You have to build that with the team. One of the things that I've applied in a number of organisations is what I call a cultural charter.
Okay.
And that's actually where I sit down with the teams and we talk about what culture do we need? What culture do we want? And it starts at the real basic things about turning up to meetings on time. But if they think that's important, the culture has to come from the teams.
Yeah.
And they build that culture. They write down the cultural charter. What are the key things that they are going to police? It's not my culture, it's our culture. And then I get them to physically sign it. And that's something that we work with to develop. And it's not, the culture is not something that stands still either. It's something that needs to change as people develop, as the needs of the business organisation, as the suppliers change, as our relationships with suppliers change.
Yeah.
Very often I go into organisations where the relationship with suppliers are very adversarial, very traditional kind of procurement. I'd like to move that away to a true partnership. And that, again, that needs a change in culture, needs a change in people's beliefs. So it's a journey.
Yeah, I totally agree on the listening piece. It's a skill, us recruiters, I say it's our number one skill, that you need to be a good recruiter, is that listening, understand the needs of your client. And I think we were talking off air beforehand, often we see it with procurement leadership when it's gone wrong, where you've had new procurement directors or CPOs going into an organisation and they just go, we're going to do it this way, blah, 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 blah. And they don't listen to the stakeholders at all. They don't get their feedback. They don't collaborate with them. It's very much the cookie cutter approach, or this is the way I've always done it. And that really, whenever we speak to a department and we say, oh, procurement is a bit disengaged, 90% of the time it's because of that reason. They've not been listening when they've been onboarded. So, and I guess those, the first few months when you've been on board into a new role and been invested in, that's the most, would you say that's the most critical sort of time to be really listening and understanding the stakeholders?
I'm hesitating because I don't think there is a really critical time.
Okay.
You have to keep listening all the time because the world changes, because it's just a different response. When at the beginning of a change, a transformation, and an evolution of an organization, I find myself being very inward looking.
Yeah.
So yes, I need to listen to the suppliers. Yes, I need to listen to the business, but the priority has to be that team. How do I get that team all going in the right direction? Or how do I get that culture where they really are thinking outside the box, how they are using the tools they've got, but not letting perfection be the enemy of progress, which I see very often. So the listening skills there are slightly, is different. It's very softer, whereby as an organization develops and as that team gets better, it's more emboldened, gets more confidence. And with that confidence, what I find becomes better governance, better data management, better focus on strategies, because people are getting lined up and they're working together as a team. Then the conversation starts listening to suppliers. Or the conversation may need to start listening to the business. So, okay, we've started doing category strategies. We started to understand the data. We started to put in place the systems that we're really using. So everybody has systems, but who do they really use them? And do they really drive the value? Let's strip all those out, get the proper ones in place. So once you've earned that right, because you've got your own house in order, you then start having credibility with the business. And it becomes a different conversation. So instead of you being defensive or sometimes aggressive, which I see procurement people do because we know the right answer. Well, you might have the right answer, but it might not be the answer that the business needs. And that's a different listening process. And so to answer your question, I don't know when's the most important time to listen.
So
there's different skills.
Consistency, though. It sounds like it's a consistent thing throughout, that you need to be always engaged and listening to what the business needs with. And I totally agree with everything you're saying there, but is that self-taught for you? Is that something you've had to learn the hard way from not listening? Or I'd love to explore a bit more about, you've got a wealth of experience. We've reeled off some great brands that you've gone in and really led change. But yeah, self-taught, developed over the years, mentors. Talk me through sort of how you've come to that point in your career and how you've approached it.
I think anything in life is a mix. I'm dyslexic. I'm very proud of being dyslexic. Dyslexia thinking, I think, is a great tool. It's a talent. It's my superpower. But because I've been dyslexic and had to struggle through my academic career, I've had to listen to people and take guidance. And I think when you've been through a lot of failure, listening to people becomes easier. I also started my life actually in manufacturing systems engineering. So I started my life managing a factory in Africa, believe it or not.
Wow.
I was very lucky. I came out of Coventry Polytechnic, ended up managing a factory of 230 people at the age of 26 in Africa. And you can only do that successfully by listening to people, because at the age of 26, you haven't got the answers. You need to listen to people.
And with the language barrier as well, presumably.
Absolutely. But the lean manufacturing training as well, that is all about, whether it's not so much Six Sigma, because I think that's very data-led, but the 5S, the MUDA, looking at waste, that how you go through those processes is all about listening and talking to people. So that grounding in lean manufacturing, I think, really put me into a great place when I moved into procurement, and also the MBA at Cranfield. I think I went from being a very black and white engineer to realizing the softer skills are so important. And I think Cranfield, I have to give credit, fantastic organisation, and really taught me some errors of my ways. And then that moved into kind of mentors. I was lucky enough when I started my career in procurement to be, I'm going to say adopted, because Tim Williams, who was, and Detlef Schultz might not like me saying this, but Tim was the mastermind of the Vodafone procurement company in my eyes. And he was a most phenomenal leader, which I learnt a lot from. And he was a very people-orientated, very, very bright gentleman. Went on to be CPO at MTM in Dubai. So he was a great mentor, and is still a great mentor of mine.
That's brilliant. All these years later, and I think that's really interesting. So you've got a sort of a mixture from an academia point of view, the learns from previous organizations you've worked in, and then I guess the mentoring bit as well. Because I think it's something I struggle with over the years in terms of from a learning point of view. I wish I had a mentor earlier. I always talk about this on the podcast and to people. Like, so you sound like you had that from an early age, that you had mentors and people that guided you through your career as well.
I did. But interestingly, I'm almost only coming back to the need of a mentor. Okay. So I had mentors at the beginning of my career, and I guess my ego got in front of me at certain points and didn't feel that I needed those mentors. And I'm now very much going back into that phase where actually, why wouldn't you take advice from other people? Why wouldn't you search that out? Why wouldn't you? You don't have to act on it, but why wouldn't you go and ask somebody that's done it before, learn from their mistakes?
Yeah. And indeed maybe peers of yours as well.
Oh, all the time.
Learning from you.
I'm a great believer in we're talking about listening. You can learn, I really do believe you can learn as much from the most junior ranks in your organization as you can from the most senior, because they have different perspective. Yeah. They ask the questions that may be naive, that group thinking has stopped those being asked. And I think it's really important to listen to all walks of experience, because they've got something to add.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously in your career today, we list off some great brands you've worked for over the years from a real range of industry sectors. Was that a conscious decision for you to diversify the industries you've worked in? Was it just that was when the opportunities had arrived, or?
No, very, very much conscious. Yeah. I describe it as, and I would say TfL is my final piece of my Trivial Pursuit cheese. Okay. Yeah. So going into Vodafone was not conscious. I fell into procurement, absolutely loved it, because I don't believe there's any organisation that is as central as the hub, or can be a hub as an organisation, as procurement and commercial can be. Yeah. And we can talk about that later. But that was technology, global. I recognised that I needed to look in other areas, and a great opportunity to do that was PwC, working with organisations like Heineken, Mars, again, fast-moving consumer goods.
But on the other side of the fence, that's interesting, just on that point. So going into the consultancy, so you're on the other, how was that transition across?
I was very lucky, actually, because I was negotiating with a partner in PwC while I was at Vodafone.
While you're at Vodafone.
And I came back to the UK, actually for, I don't mind saying this, my wife had postnatal depression, and I was in Luxembourg, and I needed to come back to the UK. Yeah. And the partner at PwC actually said to me, we'd prefer you to be on our side of the fence as opposed to the opposite side. Do you want to come and work for us?
You must have done something good then.
Yeah, so, but it was fascinating. And again, different skills. And I would encourage anybody starting out in procurement to actually try and change, because look for that variety, because the skills that consultancy taught me about the structure, about how to look at problems, and about, which actually melded very well with the Cranfield experience. But it was a different experience. It was a different way of approaching things, a different way of asking questions, and also managing projects, which I think is a huge part of procurement and commercial that people don't discuss enough. Everything we do is a project in many ways, and how to manage that, the consultancy side was really helpful. And again, then moving on to Royal Mail, what I hadn't done by then. So first half of my career was very much about process, policies, procedures. I then hadn't managed people. So I was consciously, I've got to go and manage people. I understand procurement. I've seen the technology. I need to prove that I can manage people. I mean, I did it in Africa, but I'm going to come and do it in the UK. So I managed a team, did the transformation in Royal Mail.
How did you find that? First time people managing in the UK?
I love it. I love people. You know, to me, that is the opportunity to develop people, the opportunity to build a team and see them grow is something that I've always loved. I just think it's so love that opportunity. And then what I had lacked then was actually the international experience. So moving to Centra gave me an international team. So I'd managed a team, managed billions of pounds at Royal Mail, ticked all those boxes, hadn't managed an international team. So Accenture gave me an international team, which were literally everywhere from Shanghai to east coast of the US and everywhere in between, managed that international team. And then moving to TfL, what I hadn't done is manage a huge, complex organization. And you don't get any bigger or more complicated than TfL. 360 odd people, 4 or 5 billion pounds worth of spend, 60 billion pounds worth of contracts. It is phenomenally complicated, but massively rewarding. So that's my final piece of kind of cheese.
Yeah, very good. I like that, the Trivial Pursuit piece. That's a good analogy. So in terms of in the sector, 20 plus years now, what major changes have you seen? So taking procurement in 2024 versus at the start, what are the obvious changes that you've seen?
So I've kind of seen, instead of change, I'll say I've seen waves.
Okay.
So the first wave was really almost the professionalization of procurement and commercial. And with that came technology and the category management approach. And A.T. Kearney, 8 Steps, Ariba, all of those things kind of came together and allowed economics to be applied to procurement. I think we then saw a push where procurement really pushed for the place at the top table, the CPO. And I think we actually missed a trick there, because what we missed was the behaviours piece.
Okay.
And that top table has, I think, dropped down a little bit. And I think we're now seeing the rise of AI, which is we need to embrace. It's going to change our profession massively, but we need to embrace it, because I think what AI will bring is even more focus on those softer skills, on those, we talked about the listening skills right at the beginning, because ultimately it's people that make the decisions. AI will accelerate processes. They will give us better access to data. They will bring us closer to perfect information, which will allow us to have conversations as opposed to negotiations, because we'll know what the rates should be. We'll know what the margin should be. We will know what something should cost. So actually, that conversation with a supplier about innovation, that conversation with a supplier about when something's gone wrong, what can we do to fix it? Those are personal skills. Those are very different skills to that we're negotiating. 20 years ago, you sat in a room and you thought,
thrashed it out.
How much information has he really got? How close are we to perfect information? Quite far. Well, let's blag it. Let's. That's not. We shouldn't be like that anymore. So, actually, I'm not frightened about AI. I think it's going to revolutionise our industry. I think we should embrace it, because the people side is going to allow us to become that hub. So where else in any business function do you talk to marketing, talk to finance, talk to operations, and pull all that together? We do. And actually, if something goes wrong with a supplier, we're the ones talking to them. We can't. If we position ourselves correctly, and that's before we even start talking about our role in driving social value, start driving environmental projects. So we're phenomenally positioned, but I just think we've got to be very, very careful that we think about our personal skills, about our emotional intelligence, about how we go about doing that. Because the days where we were all very sure of ourselves because we managed billions of pounds and we've delivered X number of savings, well, that's not going to cut it. It's about how do we work with people? How do we work with people? Again, this project side, how do we work with people to deliver these projects is going to be more and more important.
Yeah, no, totally agree. What do you think of the sort of rhetoric around AI is going to make certain roles in procurement redundant? I've seen that a lot. I'm sure you've seen it out in the press and on LinkedIn and other different social platforms around sort of the potential redundancy in certain roles in procurement.
So I liken this to emails.
Okay.
So if you go back to our parents' generation, emails, we had secretaries, you sent stuff in the post, the contract got sent in the post, it got signed. There was a whole industry around things being sent in the post. It's now emailed. That time that it took has gone. The activity has gone. But people are still working. They're just doing other things. So I see AI enabling people to focus on more value-added activities.
Yeah.
So yes, the world it's changing now. It's going to, and that's good. We need to change, and so in short, yes, but we shouldn't see it as a threat. We should see it as an opportunity.
And also reinforcing your point there around taking the workforce and jobs from that sort of more IQ to sort of the EQ side of things. It's that more that, as you say, the soft skills, the behaviours, the emotional intelligence. And I was having a conversation with someone this morning around actually what do people look for? What do talented people look for? You talk about the listening skills, you're spot on. And that ability to flex your communication style depending on who you're talking to. I'm sure you'll have a very different way of communicating with the CFO versus one of your buyers in your team, or versus someone in the marketing team, or IT or finance, etc. So do you it sounds like you do, but sort of agree with that from a soft skill?
Without question.
Yeah.
Without question. But again, you mentioned right at the beginning about, where's your priority of listening?
Yeah.
How you listen to different people is important. How you interact with people is important, because we all have, and I think this is where my dyslexia has helped me, because my self-awareness about my learning preferences has made me aware that everybody has different preferences to how they take in information.
Yeah.
Because in essence, every listening conversation or conversation you have with somebody is giving information and receiving information, and you are trying to give information in order to get an outcome on the other side. Now, understanding people's preference for how they absorb that information and or act on it, surely that's got to be an advantage if you think that through.
Yeah, sort of visual learning or whatever your learning preference is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick break from the episode. I hope you're enjoying today's show. To keep up to date with our Talent Talks podcast episodes, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. This will help build our audience and our mission to raise the profile of procurement. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. So in terms of the challenges right now, so we talked about the rise of AI and automation. That's prevalent to see, obviously, sort of ESG and that wider agenda that procurement absolutely are driving in lots of organisations like yours at the moment at TfL. What do you see as the major challenges at the moment for the procurement sort of sector?
I'm concerned. I wouldn't say challenge. I'd say I'm concerned. I'm concerned that we are not embracing the geopolitical challenges that we have.
Okay.
And
internationally.
Internationally, yeah. Because and I don't want to comment on. I'm not going to have an opinion on those, but we have to be mindful that what happens to the steel industry in China, or if Taiwan is invaded, what that will happen, impact on the semiconductors, how's that going to affect us? We have to be mindful of the political ramifications of whoever wins in the US and how that's going to affect world trade policies about insourcing, outsourcing. These things are going to affect all of us. And I think I can remember having a conversation at a procurement gathering of CPOs just after COVID, and I can remember talking to them about inflation is coming. Inflation is coming. We need to start locking in our contracts for those. And I was a lone voice, and people were, no, it's not. It's going to be fine. There's going to be, we're all going to get back to normal. We need that impacts everybody. Unfortunately, it's and the modern world that we live in, that geopolitical influence is something that I think we need to, as a procurement and commercial organisation, need to start thinking about how we protect our organisations. And that's before we even start thinking about the environmental piece. I mean, unfortunately, as we sit here today, we have the horrible hurricane that's happening in the US. These events are becoming more prevalent, and how is that going to affect us? How's flooding going to affect us in the UK, or if you're in a global organisation, how's that going to affect your supply chain? So we have lots of challenges ahead, but those are opportunities also, because it comes back to me about how we can be a hub for the organisation, and we should be a hub for the organisation. So if there is a geopolitical event, if there is a change in the oil price, if there is a change in the electricity price or there's a shock of some. How do we protect our organisation from that? So, from talking to finance, do we forward buy? Do we how do we do that with operations on the supply?
Stockpiling, which is something
stockpiling.
that,
Do we need to?
Yeah.
So we've got to think broader, and I think this conversation about procurement and commercial, where I think some people are still in this negotiation category strategy approach, we've got to start thinking broader.
Yeah.
Our ability is almost moving into operations, market. We are that hub, and we should look to be that hub in an organisation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, if we look at it from where it was sort of 10, 15 years ago, as you say, that sort of, it was the sourcing element, right? It was going out there and doing some sourcing, some buying, getting some cost savings in, all that. Procurement has gone on so much since then. You talk there in reference around that sort of supply risk management, which I guess that's sort of coming under that geopolitical, agility to have that foresight. We talked about ESG, we talked around the wider sort of, not just the contract management piece, but procurement want to be at the table talking about revenue generation and looking at those.
Absolutely.
These are conversations they need to do as a step change for it. And I think it's a really interesting way you've put it today. I've not actually heard someone describe it in that geopolitical way, because you're right. I mean, every day we turn on the TV and there's something new that's happening in the world that's going to impact us from a consumer point of view, from a commercial point of view. Yeah.
So I find it really interesting that group thinking, right? People talk about AI as a threat. How often have you heard AI being talked about as an innovation? How often have you heard it being talked about as an opportunity? So turn the conversation on its head. What opportunities are AI going to bring us in procurement? Not what jobs are going to be lost. What opportunities are going to be? How can it make us more environmentally friendly? How can we use AI to make sure that they aren't bad things in the supply chain that we don't want? How do we use AI to make sure that we have the correct stock? I'm making these things up, but I think we need to change it. And this innovation piece, again, is something that a procurement and commercial function, we need to be champion. We should be this engine that brings, because we're touching everybody. We're touching all of these suppliers. We're seeing the problems, but we're also seeing potentially the solutions if we're listening and talking to the suppliers and looking to the marketplace, and we can bring those two together. That's a really powerful place. And actually, you talked about revenue generation. If you're bringing together a problem and you're bringing together a solution, you could be generating revenue. Why shouldn't we be looking at that? Why shouldn't we be pushing that?
I totally agree. And actually, on that point around AI, when I talk to people and I ask them what the biggest challenge at the moment, what do they not have at the moment? They say time. They don't have enough time to do their job. Well, surely AI, that's what it's there for. My wife's a PA and she uses AI to do all the note taking on her meetings and stuff. And it's like, sorry, wife, but you do it. No, it's great. A lot of people do it. But it's like, it's streamlining time. She's like, I'm more efficient to do other things that my C-suite need me to do.
So
amazing.
It's interesting. Dyslexia, challenge, but an opportunity. I use, like your wife, I use AI to do my notes
it's
as well.
amazing.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Incredible. We've used it in our team meeting now. It's great. And it streamlines the time, and it means that then we've got more time to do other things, and and rather than just the note taking and then translating onto emails and sending it to. So I see it as huge opportunities to procure, and I agree. I think we need to change the narrative to a positive one. So well said. So in terms of talent, I wanted to touch on that. We talked about the evolution of procurement and where it was at the start of your career to now. People, you've managed a lot. You've seen a lot. How have you seen that evolve? And I guess just for today, modern day talent, what does talent mean for you?
Wow, that's a really big question. I don't think there's one answer to that question, because somebody who is really talented in one particular walk, in one particular avenue, that could be a great fit for a particular industry culture, that's talent, right? Somebody's ability to do something else, or somebody who could be very detail-orientated, data-orientated, maybe not particularly gregarious, that's still a talent. I think for me, it's about how do you match the needs and the capabilities of people to, well, you match those two things. And then it becomes about leadership, because everybody has talent. And I'm not those of you who know me, I'm not massively woke. So I'm not saying this as a woke piece. I'm saying this because that's how you get the best out of people. Talent. Everybody has talent. How do you get the best out of them? You've got to understand what people's strengths, capabilities, what motivates them. So actually, I think talent for me is a question of the manager and the leaders about how you're drawing that. How's the talent in the market? Again, I look to the pool that I inherit, because I'm very proud at TfL that I've generated a leadership team.
You've got a great
that,
leadership.
that the majority of them have come through from the ranks. Now, when I landed in TfL, I was told that the team were all rubbish. Everybody, I'm quite happy to say that. We've got a really difficult team. I was told then by the previous leadership team that have now moved on, thankfully. But actually, there was some real talent there. And there is some real talent. There's some amazing people. And actually, over the last 3 years, the number of people that have been promoted internally is exponential. The majority of our promotions have come from internal talent, because we've looked at what their capabilities are. We've looked at what support they need. We've looked at how do you map their talent, capabilities and needs to the right problem, and then embrace it, and then empower it. And actually, it's amazing how by doing that, you see talent grow. Yeah. That doesn't mean sometimes you need to bring in external resource. And I think there's, it's an old saying, if you can't change the people, change the people. One of the things about everything I've just said here is it's change. If people keep doing the same thing and they don't look and listen at the problems around them, that talent's not going to grow. You're just going to stagnate. So, but that's scary. It's frightening. It's frightening for me. You know, you talk about me changing jobs. It's because I look for new challenges, but it is frightening. I go home, talk to my wife about it. It's scary. But otherwise, you're not living, are you? You've got to get out there and do that.
And I agree. It's about the environment that they're working in, allow them to thrive. You know, putting people in the right place to know that they'll be able to thrive in that team or that environment versus others, and aligning them. So, you know, I totally agree. Do you, on the external piece then, I mean, again, lots of narrative. We're constantly, as you can imagine, the nature of what we do in the recruitment side of procurement, around this shortage of talent. Where's your sort of mind on that? You know, do you see there a shortage of talent in the UK procurement market at the moment?
Yeah. I think there is.
Why is that?
I think that's a reputational piece around procurement commercial. I don't think there's enough people come into our function and think, so people go to marketing because it's got a reputation. If you sit at a dinner party and you tell them you're a head of procurement, you can almost see people groan. You know, it's
cost police or like
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly. It's like saying you're a lawyer or a you know, how many other people can I upset in this conversation? But I'm saying this with tongue in cheek. But you know, I can see it in people's faces on procurement. What do? You just say no, don't you? You just stop things. We've got to change that narrative, and that will bring more people in. So I think for me.
So is that just to pick? I totally agree with you there, and it's something as you can imagine because of what I'm very passionate about. Is that so? That's a PR piece, isn't it, for procurement that needs to be improved? Is that because it doesn't market itself very well? Is that from an external influencing from an academia? You referenced Cranfield. I mean, they're amazing. I was fortunate enough to work with them when I was at Coca-Cola. Brilliant organisation, but there's not enough of them, right? So is it access into procurement not enough, or is it more from a PR? What needs to be done, I guess, to improve the reputation of procurement? I mean, it's not one answer, right? But
no, there isn't. There isn't. But you'll hear me. I start talking about procurement and commercial, or I talk about supply chain. Yeah, I think we need to pin down what we really are. Yeah, and I think we are so much. You know, are we sourcing? Are we ESG? Are we what actually are we? And I think we're almost a victim of. Those players that can play in so many different positions. Not actually which position are you actually in? So I think that doesn't help. So I do think we need to, and I talk about being this hub. I would love to see us more on the narrative that we are a hub within the organisation, any organisation. So we are transfer of information. We're a guardian of transparency. We're a guardian that we help people to do things. We help finance. That's the narrative that I'd like to see us going into, because if you're talking to somebody at university and saying, do you know what, there's a function that is in the center of everything, you get to see marketing. At TfL, we've just concluded the world's largest outdoor advertising campaign. Fascinating. Working with the head of JCDecaux, who just won one of the segments of it. Fascinating. Going on to the next side, where I'm dealing with jet engines. What other function in an organisation allows you to be involved in that? That's exciting, but we don't articulate that. We don't share that. That's something at a dinner table people listen to. What, you're buying jet engines? Yeah, it's great. That's really interesting. Well, market, we don't have a narrative around that enough. I don't think.
I agree. I think there's 2 points there. I think the bit around the own sort of procurement, doing PR. I mean, I said flippantly before I started the podcast 5 years ago to a CPO around, you don't ever talk about yourself externally. Internally, to a degree, I imagine they would. And I was like, why is that? And that's why I saw the opportunity to start the Procurement podcast, because to showcase people in their careers and what they're doing and stuff. And I'm like, why is no one else talking about their, because at SIPS events and in conferences and things that are in just a procurement community, they will, and they'll showcase and you'll win awards, and that's amazing. But from an external lens, I always talk during COVID and stuff about PPE, and then it was like the reference of procurement. We won't go into PPE debate, but and it was procurement. And I remember even my wife sort of saying, Martin, because she knows what I recruit. Procurement. It was like something that Boris had mentioned around procurement, and everyone's like, procurement. It's like, well, procurement's been around for ages, and it's going to continue to grow and develop. So I do think there's that PR piece, and I think also that entry in. You said, I mean, I've interviewed now 100 and whatever people on the podcast. You are in the majority, where you said at the start, I fell into it.
Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
very few people I interview that will say, I came off grad scheme and I chose to do procurement. There is a couple, but very, very few. You're the majority of that. So we want more people to be sat here going, I joined procurement because da-da-da-da. So, I think there's two really interesting angles there on that.
Yeah, I'd love to know what the answer is, but what that magic wand is.
I think the route into market, I spoke openly at events and things before. I think good to get your views on this, but I think from an academia point of view, if we go back to that, is there procurement degrees? Actually, University of Portsmouth, just shout out to Paul Alexander if you know him. They've just started a procurement degree down at Portsmouth. Amazing progress there. So really excited by that. I'm hoping that's going to be a snowball effect, and that's going to build, and there's going to be more momentum. Because if we can get, look at finance and the ACCA stuff, and it's compulsory to go through those qualifications to get your to be a qualified accountant. That's where procurement needs to start. I believe that's only my personal view. It'd be good to get your thoughts.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be a good thing. And actually bringing economics into it. Yeah. Because ultimately, this is all economics that we do, 100%. And social economics. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And I think the dial's changing. I think business management courses now, they're having procurement modules in. We are seeing that step change, but it's probably not the pace that you and I want, because I want more. I don't proclaim here to sit and be a procurement professional, but I like to think I understand the industry. I want more people to be in it.
So I love what we do. I love our function because of the influence that you can have. I mentioned earlier about social value at TfL. We're lucky enough to the way I see it is that our shareholders are London. So all the money we get goes back out to London, and therefore we have the opportunity to do some great things to help disadvantaged people. Now, that is a great opportunity, and within procurement commercial, we can do that and influence those kind of things, influence suppliers to behave in a different way. It's really powerful. It's a great place to be. But I go back to interesting. The breadth of what you can see. So how we get that story out is important. I think podcasts like this are great. So thanks, Martin, for inviting me. But I'm also, we should be looking to bring people in from outside of other functions. And I think, again, that's something for me that we're not pursuing enough, because the skills that somebody in marketing or the skills from somebody from operations could bring into our industry are vast. But also when they go back out. So I think we need to start encouraging this crossover of segments, because I think as you go through your career in procurement and commercial, you could get pigeonholed, but I don't think that's fair, because the skill sets that you have are transferable. We talked about project, we talked about economics, we talked about working with teams. Those are all things that we do on a day-to-day basis, but those are also skills that have been used in operations, in marketing. As you become more senior, it amazes me how much actually every function gets involved in contracts. Every function gets involved, or I encourage them to get involved in negotiations, because it affects them. Somebody in logistics is interested in the contract you're going to put in place in their supply chain, or 3PL. They're interested, so they get involved in those contracts. So they're all touching it. So why don't we move people in and out? Why are we being so... I mean, you mentioned to me about my career, about being in different segments. So, worked in IT, worked in logistics, worked in manufacturing, worked globally. But I still see myself being segmented into the last area that I've been. So, government. So, am I now dyed in will government? I don't see I'd be surprised if my next challenge will be within government, because I'll be looking for something else. But why do people pigeonholes? I think we need to be broader and look at
agile in that approach. Totally agree. And actually, the final point on that I would say as well is retention. So I interview all these people, meet all these brilliant CPOs, procurement directors like yourself, and then they sort of I fell into the procurement profession. They're still there. So it's not that they go it and they fall in love with it, like you clearly case point. So there is that, very rarely I'll meet people that go and then I left it and went into something else, and they might go into consultancy later in their career or something. But generally speaking, once you're in procurement, people then tend to stay in their career. So my final question today is around advice. There's going to be a lot of people listening that are aspiring CPOs out there. What advice would you give to anybody that is, whether now or in the next few years, is thinking about that step up? Because it's an incredibly competitive market at your level, and certainly when we're hiring in it, never had as many applications for a CPO or procurement director role. What is the advice you give to allow someone to stand out from the crowd if they're going to be looking for that role?
So, a CPO, what do? We do people and politics, and there's a irony in here, in that you've worked really hard to hone your skills in negotiations, in process and procedure, in category strategies, in a particular segment. You've looked after a particular category, done amazingly, made sure everything's got delivered on time, delivered your savings. And all of a sudden you're managing 360 people. The skill set that you need is very different, and you need to be really mindful of that, because it is about people. Yes, it helps if you have an understanding of procurement, but actually I can always ask somebody. But how you build that team, how you motivate people, how you are very clear about people's objectives, how you ensure that success is rewarded, and maybe people that aren't as successful are helped to be successful, and or maybe encouraged to go somewhere else. All of that's hard, and that people side. And then there's the politics piece. Politics is real. It's very easy to say, I don't like it, don't want to be involved in it. You get two people in a room, there's politics. And the further up you go, it becomes political. And that's not with a big P, that's it, just the people piece. So be very mindful of that. And that, to me, is the key to success, people and politics.
Jono, thank you so much for joining me. I've loved our chat today. Could talk for hours, but I really appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing the next steps, both in terms of where you take your role at TfL and future into 2025. So thank
Martin,
you so much.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll be back soon with more Talent Talks podcasts. In the meantime, please hit the subscribe button on your favourite platform. See you soon. Take care.